a passionate open source maintainer, and an enthusiastic contributor to the open source community. So, over to you, Pranshu.
Yep. Hi everyone. So I'm Pranshu, and as Lisa mentioned, I'm a software engineer at Keploy, and I'm here to talk about technical documentation and how you can use it to its best effect for contributing to open source projects. So without, let's get started. So let me just share my screen. Yep. So basically, in documentation, there are many types of documentations. So we have one user documentation, and some are contributor documentations, and some are technical documentations. What the basic difference is that in technical documentation, there are no abstractions. Like in user documentation, the part about contributing to the project and the technicalities of the project are abstracted from the user because they don't need to know how the project is functioning or how everything is coming together. But in technical documentation, everything needs to be specified, how things are working, what tech stacks are being used, and how everything is coming together to function as a single unit. So that is exactly what technical documentation is. And in open source projects, it is of much more importance because um, basically all the code of open source projects is out there on GitHub, so everyone can take a look at it. So if anyone wants to contribute to this project, they need to understand what all is going on in the project and what sort of technologies they are using. So for that, people create a technical documentation so that people can understand the various aspects of the project and the jargon that is being used in the project and everything. And even if someone does not want to contribute to the project and just wants to troubleshoot their problems or do anything like that, they can also refer to the technical documentation of the project and help themselves. So, as previously mentioned, the importance of technical documentation in open source projects is huge. And that is what separates a successful open source project from not a successful open source project. Because a successful open source project has good documentation that a lot of people can understand and get started with easily, and hence they'll have more contributors, and that will help the project maintainers to ship and build their project quickly. And if a project does not have good documentation, obviously people will have a hard time in contributing to that project, and most of the people will give up, and that project will not really take off in the long run. So, in case of open source projects, technical documentation is of prime importance. So, the key elements of an effective documentation can be different from project to project. Like some projects like to delve deep into every technology that they have used, every services that they are using, and how these services are communicating with each other. But some projects may just like to provide information about the important things that the contributors need to contribute to that project. So that part needs to be um, that part can be understood by talking to the maintainers of the project and by going through the technician of that project. And one more thing I'd like to mention here is that if you're trying to contribute to a project, first of all, you need to understand what that project does and understand what technologies that project is using. So for that, everyone who is um, helping you contribute to open source project always tells you to contribute to those projects that have that you have personally used or whose technology stack you have personally used. Like if you have used JavaScript before, then you should try to start contributing with JavaScript projects. Or if you have used some app or website in the past, then you should try contributing to that one, because if you don't understand the technical documentation or the project well, then it will be very hard for you to contribute to that project. So obviously there are some common things that are common across all the documentation of, like, it should have a good logical structure, and things should be concise, but where there needs to be an explanation, it should be a good explanation. All the other details can be discussed with the maintainers of that project. And one more thing I'd like to mention here is that in any open source project, the people who are maintaining the project or who are building the project can technology, and they can like perfect its marketing. But one thing that they cannot perfect is the documentation of the project, because with documentation of the project, they are not the direct user of that documentation, because they know their project in depth. But if someone is y- coming or using their project for the first time, they will interpret their differently. So they cannot find the loopholes in their own documentation, because they interpret it differently. Or if they have any problems, they already know beforehand, or they can ask someone. But if someone is contributing to that project for the first time, they'll read and go through the documentation in a completely different way. So maintainers of almost all the projects are looking for people who can come up and help them improve their documentation, because as I previously mentioned, that is what becomes the difference between a good open source project and a not so good open source project. So that's why I believe that contributing to technical documentation can be a great way for people to kickstart their open source journey. You just need to read the documentation properly, and you need to see how you can make it easy for newcomers to understand it and start to use it. So, as I previously mentioned, there are different types of documentation: user documentation, contributor documentation, and technical documentation. And um, in technical documentation, also you have a lot of aspects, like installation guides. You can have um, a user manual, and obviously troubleshooting guides, and the FAQ guides if for the people who face common problems in the project. So that can be
Excuse me,
updated
Pranshu, one
according to.
second. Are you sharing anything, or the screen is not visible? That's right.
Oh, my screen, it actually stopped in between.
Like it
Is my
went
screen
in
visible
between.
now? Um, is my
Okay,
screen
yes, it
visible?
is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's
So,
visible now. Thank you.
okay. Yep. So as I mentioned, even in technical documentation, we can have different types of different sections in the documentation. Like the first of all, we'll have the installation guides, because if you want to contribute to that project, you need to know how that project works. So for that, you'll need to install it in your local machine, and then with that installation guide, we'll probably have an FAQ or a troubleshooting guides for the common problems that people face while installing that project. And apart from that, then each project has their own specific things that they use. So suppose if they have some services that they use that are very important, those will be explained in the documentation. And if they have some sort of special API that they are using, then that will be also explained in the documentation of that project. So as I mentioned uh, before, the best practices depend from project to project, because different people approach this differently. So for understanding the best possible practices for a project, you need to actually talk to and collaborate with the maintainers of the project and understand what their idea is and how they want to present their project to the other new open source contributors. But there are obviously some common things that you can follow that are um, like it should have a good logical structure, and you should use consistent language across all the documentation. This is something that has been missing from a lot of documentation that open source projects have, that they don't have consistency. Like if something is in some way in the documentation, those keywords or that jargon is changed in some other part of the documentation. And this leaves a very bad impression for everyone who is maintaining the project and for those who are coming to contribute to that project. So these are some things that can be avoided, and these should be avoided. And so you need to collaborate well and communicate with the maintainers, so that these problems don't occur with you. So obviously the tools and technologies that you can use for documentation are various CMS technologies, and you can use Git. And one of the most common files used for these systems are markdown files. So you need to understand how markdown files are used, how you can edit and add different types of tags to those files and everything, so that they can be used properly and you can contribute to those projects. And so usually these things are mentioned in good projects about what technologies they are using and how you can use those technologies to write and contribute to those projects. So usually when you are starting out or you are contributing to a new project, you can you should basically go for projects that are big in size, because they usually have a very thorough documentation that explains everything that you need to know for getting started while contributing to these projects. So that will help you get a more deeper understanding of what you need to know to get started. And these um, organizational strategies are something that you need to discuss with the maintainers and collaborate with the other people in the project, so that you can work with them and create a good and organized technical documentation that is consistent across all the pages. So the different types of challenges that you can face in contributing documentation is, obviously, if the documentation is not already good, if it is inconsistent, or if things are like outdated in some part of the documentation somewhere, then that obviously creates a problem for new contributors to contribute to that project. So like if some jargon has been used in some way at some part of the documentation and that has been changed in other parts of the documentation, then that becomes a problem. So whenever you are contributing documentation, make sure that first thing is most important is that it is consistent across all of the pages that you are contributing to it, and it should not be outdated, and every information should be consistent according to the latest update of that project. So now I want to show you a good case study of a good open source project that has a good documentation. So this is a project that I contributed to a while back, and this is the OPIA Foundation. So this is basically a foundation where people, children from underprivileged backgrounds can come and learn math. So as you can see, and one more thing I forgot to mention, that in these huge open source projects, they need to be translated to a lot of different languages. So there you can have an opportunity, like if you are if proficient in one of these languages, then contributing to these projects becomes extremely easy, because you just need to understand what that documentation is saying, and you can just translate it to a language and contribute to it. So this is their website, and you can just start contributing from here and start using on this website. So let me just show you their GitHub and their documentation. So as you can see, this is their documentation, and first thing you can see is that they have a different documentation from the for the user and the contributor. So if you see the user documentation, as you can see, all of the information about the techn- technology of the project has been abstracted in this user documentation, because anyone who's using this uh, documentation, or who wants to teach on Opia, does not need to know how this Opia website is built, or how uh, people are contributing code to it, what services it is using. So as you can see, it only has information about the features of the site that it uses. So how you can create an exploration, how you can plan the exploration, and the dashboard that you can have, and all these things that a user might need for contributing to this project. And if we take a look at the contributors wiki, so even in the contributors wiki, they have different set of documentation for the programmers, for the designers, for the UX, and all the different kinds of way that you can contribute to OPM. So if we take a look at this coders documentation, so yeah, so the first and foremost section here is setting things up. So uh, basically how you can get started with contributing code to the OPA Foundation. So the first thing mentioned here is the CLA. CLA you'll find in almost all the open source projects out there, and CLA is basically an agreement that you agreed to contribute your intellectual property to that project, and you have no problem in doing so. So this is something that you have to sign while contributing to almost all the projects. And after that, they have like a contributor survey, because they want to understand what are the interests and need of each of the contributors, so that they can help them and assign them different projects according to their needs and interests. And we scroll down, then um, this is, I think, something that is project specific, that they want to help you set up two-factor authentication. But usually projects don't ask you to do this, but this is something that this project is asking you to do specifically. And if we scroll down, then yes, almost every good or established open source project has good first issues. So if you go to their issues page, um, if you go to any established open sources issues tab, they'll have different issues, like they might have for Hacktoberfest, if they're participating in there. But every project will have a good first issues for contributors who are contributing for the first time to that. project. So if you have read the technical documentation, and if you have installed it on your personal machine, then you can go ahead and take a look at these good first issues, see if you understand them. And one more thing that is important is that before contributing to an issue, you must make sure that it is assigned to you, because multiple people can come and try to contribute on that issue. So in that case, you need to mention that you are working on it, and the others can maybe look for some other issues to contribute to. So this is about the issues. And as you can see, for the contributors, if they want to learn, they have also provided a list of learning resources that people can use to learn the technologies that have been used in this project, so that m- more and more contributors can understand and improve this project. And these are some good first issues. And see, as I mentioned, in established open source projects, everything is mentioned from scratch. So in this project, it is also mentioned how you can open a PR in their project. Basically, if you are contributing to project, some things are expected of you, like you need to know the basics of uh, Git and GitHub, so that you can make your own fork and like create your own branch and then contribute to code according to it. But see, in established open source projects, a lot of things that you need to know also will be explained in a good and descriptive manner. So as you can see, they also have the instructions for that. And they have a good and descriptive flowchart about how, what are the roles of different contributors that you can have. This is something that is specific to this project, and this is something that you can check out. And also one more thing that they have mentioned is what are the things that you can do to succeed in this project. So this project has been a part of GSOC since I think about 2016. So it is a very established project. So a lot of people come to this project by searching it on the GSOC website. So they take that into consideration, and they want people to contribute to their project in Google Summer of Code. So they have mentioned these tips for success for people who are trying to contribute to this project. And as you can see in the user documentation, none of this is mentioned. You just have all the things that you need to contribute to this project, and how you can use the different elements on the website of the OPF Foundation. And apart from that, also one more thing that you need to see when contributing to this project is on what channel these devs of the project communicate on. So mostly they communicate on Slack or Discord, but this project specifically communicates on Google Chat. You need to uh, um, maintainers on Google Chat and basically contribute according to it. So this is what a good documentation looks like, and this is what you should be aiming for when contributing documentation in open source projects. And uh, this is basically what I wanted to talk about, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranshu, for an excellent session on technical documentation. And that was yet another amazing session. So, if you folks learned something new and amazing, please don't hesitate to share your thoughts and insights on social media. And please make sure to tag SheBuilds, and we'll be happy to share your learnings on our handle. So if you have any doubts, sorry, please feel free to reach out to Pranshu on his socials. You can find his contact information in the video descriptions. So thank you again, Pranshu. We had an amazing time with you. So see you all tomorrow in the next session. Happy hacking!